Hi friends, welcome to Overgeek It, where we overthink our favorite movies and shows like Star Wars. Star Wars helps us to escape the challenges in our lives by giving us fictional challenges to dwell on that our heroes overcome. In doing so, it gives us the courage to face the challenges of our world with renewed vigor. Today, we are talking about creating the best galactic government.
Hello there.
Ever since the first Star Wars movie came out, fans have been fascinated by the idea of a galaxy-wide government. However, as we have seen in the movies, establishing a stable and effective galactic government is no easy feat. Just like creating a nation in the real world, in this video we will explore the key factors that contribute to a successful galactic government, many of which are similar to what makes a successful nation in our world. So whether you're a Star Wars fan or a political science enthusiast, this video will have something for you. So grab your darksaber and toss it, because choosing your leader by who is the best warrior is stupid. Now let's get started. For the Republic. The Republic stood peacefully for thousands of years, but became complacent. Without an army, the Sith manipulated the masses into voting themselves into an empire due to the fear of the Separatists, which were just controlled opposition. The empire in turn crumbled in a decade due to overreach and tyrannical rule. In the New Republic, and trying to distance itself from the empire, demilitarized so much that they were destroyed by the First Order in a single attack. Planetary city-states, such as the Mandalorians, were technologically advanced, but were stuck in a tribal society plagued by civil wars and genocides. Plazir 15 was a wealthy planetary direct democracy, but it was also on the verge of collapse. The ignorant majority voted to quit working and make droids do all the work. And once these droids started malfunctioning, there was no one left who knew how to work, and the masses, who have now become lazy, voted to leave the droids functioning. We're going to discuss the successes and failures of each of these factions in order to create our government. The Mandalorians were known as the most formidable warriors in the galaxy. So much so, Count Dooku chose a Mandalorian bounty hunter to be the basis for the clone army. But when it came to politics, the Mandalorians were some of the worst leaders with their history full of civil war. Instead of a state-sponsored death fight for leadership, an elected leader, either directly or by a legislator, such as the parliamentary system in the United Kingdom, would be a much better option. Heck, even a successor chosen by the current leader would be better than this fight club. To prevent corruption, a republic with a plurality voting system that balances majority and minority opinions would be the least unfavorable form of government. This system provides stability and prevents frequent directional changes. This is similar to the framers of the U.S. Constitution, who are worried about the tyranny of a majority, much like Plazir 15, but were also worried about a small few elites making every decision like it had been in England up until that time. For the Mandalorians, the leader should be given the darksaber as a symbol of leadership, like the crown in the United Kingdom, rather than making it an object to fight over for leadership. Imagine if someone just broke in and stole the crown, that they could just become the new leader. That just doesn't make any sense. And your best warrior is not ever or rarely going to be your best leader. In the U.S. government, for instance, we and our framers made sure that no military leader was higher than its civilian counterpart. That is why the president is the commander-in-chief and not the highest general. A unitary system with a single level of government may work for small city-states, but for larger governments, a federal system with multiple levels of power and defined roles for each level is more appropriate. It is advisable to delegate most power to the local governing bodies. And even larger governments, such as a real-life global scale, or in Star Wars, the galactic scale, a confederal system works best, where the next level of organization has minimal or only voluntary power from the constituent parts. The key is that the largest scale is indirect representative democracy, and the smallest scale individual liberty. The fall of the Republic and the Empire is similar to the fall of Rome. Both the Roman and Galactic Republics became empires ruled by an emperor. Both empires expanded past their resources and logistical ability. This territory often took over self-governed planets against their will. The Empire also couldn't adequately protect those areas and only took them just because Palpatine wanted to control the galaxy. I'll offer my alternative to a galactic-wide government, and that is a galactic military alliance plus a smaller federal republic. In my opinion, a government the size of the Empire is impractical and should operate more like a NATO military alliance, with a goal of protecting each other from the Imperial Remnant / the Soviet Union. This alliance would act as a reserve military command and control organization that only is binding during war. This would be almost a direct continuation of the alliance to restore the Republic. This organization could even extend to the corporate sector and the Chiss. Since this is just the Galactic Alliance of Free Planets, as I would call it, this would be attractive to planets weary of joining another federal government but wanting security. This would help, instead of the New Republic completely giving in to these more weary planets and completely demilitarizing, which resulted in the First Order being able to take over so quickly. Since this is just an alliance, the process for joining would be more relaxed than the Republic itself. The Galactic Alliance of Free Planets will be made up of multiple neutral planets and our version of the New Republic. For our smaller Federal Republic, our New Republic replacement, I would call this the Galactic Federal Republic, or GFR for short, and this would be made up of systems that act as states and have most of the power deferred to them, kind of like the New Republic. However, the Galactic Federal Republic has a constitution. This includes protections for civilians to possess and use arms for self-defense and the defense of others from death or great bodily harm, kind of like the Second Amendment in the U.S. Constitution. And the most important, to be able to overthrow the government if it becomes corrupt and becomes another empire. Further constitutional protected rights would include outlawing slavery, which the Old Republic ignored in some other places. There would be no discrimination based on species, sex, or religion, except I would be weary of the Sith. I'm not sure if I would directly outlaw it, just in case that same power would be used against the Jedi. Also, there would be civil protections against law enforcement, like in the U.S. Constitution. So they can't just throw you in jail randomly, like what happened in Andor, where Cassian just got thrown in jail for being in the wrong place at the wrong time and looking kind of stressed out. Our joining requirements would be once a planet agrees to the Constitution, they can join, but only if both houses of Congress agrees and meet the requirements. Yes, instead of the huge Galactic Senate that we would have a smaller Senate with sectors, and then also the larger Senate with all the planets represented. So both houses would have to agree. Each system must have a republic or some sort of democracy to join. Even a constitutional monarchy is fine, like the Naboo. There is also a trial period of 4 years where the planet can leave or be voted out by the Congress. So after joining and the trial period, a planet has the option once every 10 years to vote to leave the Republic. But once they leave, they have another trial period of 4 years to rejoin. But a 51% majority is required to vote to join, but 75% of the majority is required to leave. This way, planets can't just leave on a whim, and it's something that's really talked about. But this would also prevent a separatist crisis where the Republic went to war trying to keep the separatists from leaving. If there is a way for these planets to leave without violence, that would be much better. For immigration requirements, I'm not going to go into this too much, but basically, similar to the U.S., citizen must pledge loyalty to the Constitution and renounce the citizenship of any other government. I would allow dual citizenship at birth, so if a Mandalorian child was born inside the New Republic, they would be allowed to keep their dual citizenship. But someone born outside the country and who wants to naturalize, they cannot keep their other citizenship. Also, any children born outside of the country that has at least one of their parents as a citizen or if they were adopted, or if that child was just born in New Republic territory when their parents were visiting, regardless of the parent's citizenship status, would be granted citizenship, kind of like in the United States. Of course, I would issue visas for work, for short-term visits, etc. So one thing I would also allow in my government is organizations like the Resistance. The constitutional guarantee of arms and self and property defense allows for militia groups and military contractors such as the Resistance and the Night Owls to operate, as long as they don't break the law and equip themselves. This can help in situations such as the Navarro pirate situation, where the New Republic couldn't help a neutral world, but a militia group could. The New Republic could sanction these groups while keeping plausible deniability if it turns out the group requesting aid is the bad guy. Furthermore, if taxpayer money isn't involved, then the only individuals choosing to interfere are the ones affected. I think this is what the U.S. should really be doing with Ukraine, is allowing people to bring aid, but the U.S. government propping up this country, there could be something we find out to be bad about Ukraine, and also likely could result to us in a war. So allowing militia groups that could get involved if they choose would protect taxpayer money and the threat of war. For the military, the Federal Republic does have a federal military, and instead of decommissioning the Alliance fleet by 90%, as we saw in The Mandalorian, a majority of the fleet would instead be divided up amongst the planetary defense forces. The branches of the Galactic Federal Republic Defense Force would be the Navy, Marines, Starfighter Corps, Army, and Shore Guard during wartime. The Shore Guard would be similar to the Coast Guard, deal with customs and border protection. Much of the military budget would be going to intelligence, special forces, and training planetary defense forces. The Galactic Federal Republic military could then focus on quick response counterattacks in case of an invasion or quick response to a rogue member planet. These planetary defense forces would be organized under Planetary Defense Force Command. Each military branch would have a training liaison in the Department of System Defense to help teach planetary defense forces in these different aspects. The New Republic Army would be a federally managed standing army, primarily used as a defense garrison and in special operations. The special operations would consist of advanced recon commandos or ARC troopers as a successor to the clone ARC troopers and Rebel Alliance shock troopers. They would act like Army Rangers and be the first soldiers to deploy once the Marines establish a beachhead in an offensive deployment, or first to respond in a defensive role to reinforce a member planet. The Republic Pathfinders would be the successor to the Clone Commandos and Alliance Special Forces. They would act more like Green Berets and carry out sabotage, hostage rescue, and train allies and planetary defense forces in guerrilla warfare. Lastly, under the Republic Starfighter Corps is the Elite Hyper Rescue Team. Hyper Rescue operators are embedded with different Special Forces units or operate from Starfighter Corps bases. Their primary mission is personnel recovery, which includes rescuing and providing medical treatment to injured or stranded personnel in hostile or remote environments, such as on enemy-controlled planets. This elite force chooses members from other units and has the highest percentage of Jedi in the military due to the incredible physical or mental requirements and the more humanitarian nature of their role. For law enforcement, again, instead of demilitarizing, the GFR would separate its law enforcement from the military. That way, galactic citizens do not feel under occupation like the Empire. The only federal law enforcement agency under the Department of Justice would be the Federal Marshal Service. It would be the successor to the clone shock troopers. They would only have primary jurisdiction over criminals that break federal law or laws on federal property. For instance, if the New Republic comes across a planet with no intelligent beings on it, that could then become federal property. They also have a designated hostage rescue team. Systems must request assistance in other crimes, though. They also protect the court system. Under the Secretary of State, we have consular security and customs and border protection. These agencies have law enforcement power, but they also provide secondary roles. Further agencies and departments with limited law enforcement power would be our Department of Energy Security Service. Think about kyber crystals and the type of weapons that the Empire made, kind of like our nuclear protection. The Department of Communications would have a HoloNet security agency. And the Department of Commerce would have credit security services to protect fraud. And then lastly, the shore police is the only military branch that would have law enforcement power. They would act as a reserve navy during wartime, but during peacetime, they would take on a spacecraft safety, search and rescue, and anti-smuggling role under the Department of Transportation. They also support other law enforcement agencies and security agencies. Other notable agencies that have in our government would be the Republic Survey Corps and the Galactic Emergency Service. The Survey Corps would be a sub-branch of the Department of Interior, and they would be tasked with exploring the unknown regions and creating new hyperspace lanes. They would often include settlers and Jedi Explorer Corps members, which would be, under my new Jedi Order, a group of Jedi trying to help using the Force to navigate hyperspace. These Jedi Pathfinders can use the Force to help navigate. The Chiss Ascendancy, as seen in the Thrawn novels, actually had usually young female Chiss that had Force powers, and they would use them as navigators, and they would call them Skywalkers, since they could tell where objects were in hyperspace and real space. The Reformed Jedi Order would have no political affiliation with the Republic, but would be protected by the freedom of religion and arms afforded in the Constitution. The Jedi would allow members to serve part-time. Like in a church, not every member is clergy, if they choose, and they would also not have as strict guidelines. Mostly just love the Force and love your neighbor. Other ideas would fall under that, such as protect the weak, the things that the Jedi were supposed to do, but in this case, they wouldn't be serving the government directly, and the freedom of arms would still allow the Jedi to have lightsabers and weapons and starfighters. So, that is how I would set up my replacement to the New Republic, keeping a balance between security and freedom, much better than how the New Republic handled it. They basically were just so afraid of war, they gave up everything. So thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments how you would set up your government in Star Wars.